Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Sherrilyn. I'm so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. I love and I appreciate you so much. You guys seriously are the freaking greatest. Every time I see somebody comment and engage on my videos, it just brightens my whole entire day. Like, I love talking to you guys. I love hearing from you. So yeah, keep that shit up. Okay, today's case, you guys. Lots to digest. I'm even just going to put a disclaimer here right now. You're probably going to get up at least 5 times throughout this video. So just go and do that right now and make sure all of your doors and windows are locked. I guarantee you're going to do it several times throughout, but just do one right now for safe measures so you can try to tell yourself, I checked, everything's good. And I apologize in advance, but for the next week or month maybe, you're going to be doing this consistently. I hate filming when people are in the house, but today I was like, I need to wait until somebody comes home because I cannot film alone today. I need somebody in my house. I can't handle this. We're gonna have our bevy, you guys. Today's whole little situation here is brought to you by Days with Gray. I told you in the last Amazon video, I was really wanting to focus on supporting local, and that's what I've been doing lately. So this actually was a surprise in my gift. Days with Gray is a local coffee cup, wine glass, tumbler, coasters, candles. She's got a whole little shop and all of her stuff has something really cheeky on it, which obviously I'm about. So I had to get this. It's like a to-go tumbler, travel wine. It's right up my alley is what it is. So this one says, maybe swearing will help. It always does, actually. And I'll put links to her shop. I don't know if she ships to the US or international. I know a lot of my supporters are in Europe and the United States. So I don't know if she ships there. Like I said, she gave me this bonus because we put a huge order in. So how perfect is that? I'm not gonna lie, you guys. I do get nervous with homemade wines. So I haven't tried this yet. It's raspberry mojito though. So I mean, it sounds promising. That was the perfect little guzzle pour. Oh my God, don't fall. Catastrophic. Okay, and something else she also added to this. I don't know if this is hers. I'm gonna have to look into it. This could be another local company, but they're called Caramunchies. So they're little snacks. And this one is salted caramel. It's coated cornflakes. This is how I'm breaking my fast today, you guys. So there's a really good chance by the end of this video, I'm not even going to be able to perform words. I'll just put the disclaimer out. This is in no way to be disrespectful to anybody involved in this case. This is just purely a me thing and who I am. Okay, I'm so excited to try these. Oh my God, they smell so good. I could just smell them. What the shit? Oh my God. Oh, it just keeps getting better. It just keeps getting better. Oh no, I'm not gonna be able to film you guys. Okay, let's have a sip. I'm a little nervous, you guys. It's gonna be great. Ooh, okay, girl. Okay, out of all of the homemade wines that I've ever had, we'll get into the whole reason why I don't drink homemade wine really in another video. That's a nightmare of itself. But this, what a positive experience now. My whole mood has shifted in homemade wines. I might give more a chance now. I'm feeling so confident to move forward now. Okay, I need more. All right, I'm feeling a bit more cozied up with you guys. Okay, so today's case is probably something that if you're Canadian, you're very familiar with. Unfortunately for us, it's most shocking for people because just who it involves and pretty much just because of how twisted and sadistic somebody so respected within our country could be, all while living a double life and no one knew. I want to first shout out my beautiful Rhonda who gave me this suggestion. It was something that I was thinking about doing and then I just thought he gives me the friggin' creeps and I'm feeling the way that I am now, like where I'm like looking over my shoulder. I didn't know if I wanted to do it. And then when I had the suggestion, I was like, okay, you're right, Rhonda, we're going to do this. So I appreciate you, all of your support and the love that you always give me. It means so, so much to me. So just hang on, you guys. Check your doors, grab your drinks, grab your snacks. If you're like my beautiful supporter, Jen, get your bath bomb because she's watching with us in the bathtub right now. And yeah, let's get settled in. So let's set the mood. This case starts in a cozy little town called Tweed in Ontario. It's a few hours away from Toronto, and it's like a quaint town. It's got a lot of retirees. They've only got like 1,600 people there, I think. So nothing's really like newsworthy there, which is probably part of the appeal. And then in September 2007, dozens of break-ins start being reported, but nothing of value is being stolen and taken from these houses. So like nobody's electronics, laptops, money, jewelry, nothing like that was going missing. But women were, not only women, sorry, let's just add this tidbit too. Teenagers as well were finding their like undergarments, underwear, bras, lingerie, swimsuits, personal garb was going missing. So it wasn't made to be a massive, huge deal. There was talk around town about it. Obviously, I think there was a warning just put out there that, hey, like keep an eye on things. This is going on. I'm sure people felt a little embarrassed. I know that a couple of houses, sex toys were also taken. So you don't want to just like call up the freaking RCMP and be like, yo, my pocket rocket's gone. Awkward, so I'm sure a lot of people were just like, we'll just chalk this up to a loss. Maybe I misplaced it, as one does. And then I think reports started, the ones that did come to light started coming because some of these houses were being hit multiple times. So, like one time you could be like, the washing machine ate that thong last week. You tell yourself that like nothing crazy is going on. And then it's like the 9th time that you're having to go to Victoria's Secret to replenish your panty drawer, something's up. But for 2 years, nothing comes to light. No one's caught. No one's suspected. And then on September 17th, 2009, in the middle of the night, a woman is woken up to an intruder in her house. And this guy just bashes her across the head. She's a new mom. She's alone at the time because her husband is a truck driver. So she's basically helpless. After he hits her, he blindfolds her. He ties her to this chair and she's like pleading for hers and her baby's life. And she hears like a camera going off. So whoever's in the bedroom with her is starting to take pictures of her. The guy just tells her, if you cooperate, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt your baby. Like, I'll let you go and I'll just leave. Basically, just don't make a sound and do what I say. So for hours, she just complies and listens to him. She says that she's put in like compromising, uncomfortable positions. She's told to put on some of her lingerie, all while being blindfolded. So she has no idea who this is or, what's going to happen next. Like, I can't even imagine that feeling. Having somebody freaking come into your house in the middle of the night, but just like that unknown like terror of just like not being able to just like see and be on guard to protect yourself for what's next. After a few hours of just horror, he leaves. So she calls the police, but there's a few issues here. For me personally, that just, annoy me a little bit. Again, I don't want to like disrespect in any way, but we see this a lot sometimes. So the police are having issues with her statement and her story. First off, they feel like it's outlandish because they had never really heard anything like that. They weren't prepared for a story of, somebody coming in and blindfolding and you have no idea who it is, and then they put lingerie on you and start taking pictures and put you in weird positions, and then they just leave and they don't hurt you. It didn't seem believable to them. And then I guess this woman was known to be a little bit erratic. I didn't look into it or know more because it really doesn't matter. But for whatever, reason they had this to think about her, they thought she could be making the story up. And then I take it so personally when anybody talks about like postpartum depression or anxiety or mental health, just because I've dealt with it and there's such like a negative stigma around it and not enough people talk about it, I think, because of that. And so this triggered me in some way because They were essentially saying that it could, this story could have something to do with a postpartum depression disorder, and that she may have made it up for some form of attention, or maybe she really truly believed that this had happened, but it didn't. So nothing's really done or reported to like the public to warn them, because they just don't have enough proof that somebody was there, and they didn't believe her. And then 13 days go by and another woman calls. This woman is 46 years old, so she's quite a bit older than the first woman. I don't know if that had any like validity to it. The first attack was on a woman in her early 20s. So this woman is 46 years old. She lives alone, and she's just on like the next road from where that initial attack happened. Like the first woman, she says somebody broke into her house. She's awoken this time though on her couch. She fell asleep watching TV. So she wakes up to somebody putting a blanket over her head and repeatedly punching her in the head. She then says that this guy reaches under the blanket and puts his hands around her throat and says not to look at him, not to resist. And he says there's multiple people in the house and that this is a home invasion, and his role in this invasion is to keep an eye on her and keep her subdued. So then he reaches under the blanket and he blindfolds her. He also ties her hands behind her back, and then he takes a knife and he slices her clothes off. Just like the first attack, this woman says she starts to hear like a camera going off. And he's like directing her how to sit, how to pose. And she's terrified for her life, so she's going along with anything he's saying. And then she says there comes a point where her head is throbbing because a f***ing piece of shit throttled her. So she tells him that she needs aspirin for her headache. And then this guy just does something unusual. He escorts her to the bathroom. She's still blindfolded, so he's like leading the way. Gets her some aspirin. She takes it. And then as they're walking back, he like starts like tapping her on the head and like rubbing her head. And he's like, yeah, sorry about that. Not to diminish like the severity of the situation or anything, but I read it and I was like, of course he did. Like even creepazoids in Canada have to say sorry all the time. But then you realize like he's not actually sorry because he keeps her tied up. It would have been different if he was like, yeah, I'm really sorry. Like this got out of hand. Like I gotta get out of here. Let's just forget this ever happened. Bye. But no, he keeps taking photos of her. He Jimmy rigs some harness get up for her. Again, makes her pose in like embarrassing and humiliating positions. And then at about 4:30 in the morning, he packs up and he leaves, and he leaves her alive like he did with the first attack. So now after this report, police were finally like, okay, let's put a warning out there. And they told the residents of Tweed, specifically women, if you can help it, try not to be alone. If you can have somebody stay with you, that's preferred. Make sure your windows and your doors were locked. So people are getting a little bit scared because that's not something that you did in this town. Like people had their doors and their windows open and unlocked. Everybody knew everybody for the most part. So now, like people are more on guard. And then this is where they officially give this guy the title, the Tweed Creeper. He's a fucking creeper, all right. They've got no leads. Whoever this isn't leaving any DNA behind. Okay, here we go, guys. Any DNA behind or like footprints, nothing to go off of. But then on October 29th, a 65-year-old lifelong resident of Tweed named Larry Davis, not Davis, Sherrilyn, you made that up. It's Larry Jones. Larry Jones pulls up to his house and he finds like 20 police officers surrounding his property. And this guy, he's described as not the friendliest. He doesn't have the greatest rapport with the residents of Tweed. Allegedly, he had an encounter with like another resident in the area and he was shot in the hand. I mean, he wasn't winning like any miscongeniality awards at their community meetings. But it was discovered that a lot of these break-ins were happening around his house. And then the woman in the second attack called the police and said she didn't see the attacker, but she thought that she recognized his voice. Larry had done some work around her house in the past before, so he was an acquaintance of hers. And she said that if she had to try to figure out who this was, it sounded like Larry. So they get a search warrant on his house. They take a bunch of his electronics. They're looking for like a treasure trove of undergarments. They don't find any, but they take his boots, knives, anything that looks suspicious, and then they bring him in for questioning. And then when he gets there, they're not like beating around the bush. Like they're hammering him with questions. They're like, you know, were you abused as a kid? What's with the panty obsession, bro? Like basically just not even giving him a chance to say like, if he even knows what they're talking about. They're just like, you did this. So he's denying it. He says he's got nothing to do with this, and he's very persistent on having a polygraph done. He wants to submit his DNA, like anything he can do to try to clear his name, he's willing to offer up. So he does all of it, and just based on the cooperation and waiting on results, they let him go home. And they don't really have any concrete evidence. Nobody left anything behind. So even if he submitted DNA, I think they would need to wait for like a match. So everything's stalled. Then in November, another break-in happens, and this woman, her husband's out of town. She wasn't home at the time though, but she notices that like her underwear drawer is like a little bit pulled out and it looks suspicious. So she goes over and she thinks she notices that some stuff is missing. But again, like not sure. You're probably trying to like justify that it could just be like lost in a pile of laundry somewhere. Excuse me, sir? But then she looks around the room and then she notices in like one of her nightside tables, you know where I'm going with this, is missing. So initially, like she's super embarrassed, obs. So she doesn't report it, but she calls one of her friends to come over and she's like, hey, like, tell me I'm crazy. You know, like, can you find any of this stuff in my house, or did somebody come in and just like specifically take these items? And this is the next day after she notices that these things are missing. So she's still like rummaging around the house looking for things. And she goes into like the office, and on her computer, there's a message on there. And it's basically like in capital letters saying, I dare you to call the police. I'd love to tell them about your big, huge dildo. How violating and humiliating. I can't even imagine what I would feel like. That would feel so taunting. I'd be terrified. And so what scares her even more is she thinks that this person was in the house hiding in the linen closet when she was initially looking around the house and like discovered what had gone missing, because she didn't notice that message earlier the day before. So she thinks this person either A, was there while she was home discovering this stuff, or B, came back and wrote this message on her computer after. So she calls the police. I mean, outside looking in, you can see that there's becoming a shift now. So, you know, for 2 years, it went from somebody breaking in and taking people's personal belongings to attacks where somebody's coming into your home, violating you, taking photographs, and then leaving. And now, like, you know, like a sadistic, taunting, threatening. So you can see that this guy is just like teetering on the point of crossing the line, which he does a week later. He goes to the house of Marie-France Como. She was a flight attendant for the military, and she came from a line of soldiers. So her grandfather had served in the military, her dad did, and because of that upbringing, she grew up in Quebec, New Brunswick, Germany for a point in her life. And it was a life that she enjoyed, so she followed suit and joined the military herself. She is described as like a complete joy to be around. She lit up the room everywhere she went. She was beautiful, very intelligent. Everybody who spoke about her just said like how fun she was and positive to be around. She didn't have any kids, but she was in a common law relationship for like 4 years, and that gentleman had 2 boys, and she adored them, and vice versa. They really, really loved her. And it sounds like even when that relationship had deteriorated, that connection and bond was still there. In 2002, she was also part of one of the first Canadian troops to be sent out to Afghanistan. And all of her, you know, comrades said that even in those extreme conditions, under that intensity, she never lost her positivity or humor or joy. So she was the one with like a smile on her face always and boosting up the morale. And it sounded like even like some of the higher ranking people would be like, no, we want her like over here in our little base. So she was really popular for specifically just her personality, which I'm sure influenced the fact that she was somebody who worked alongside our prime minister at the time too. So she was the one who would accompany on flights across Canada, even around the world. So obviously, you know, very respected. She had actually just finished a tour with the prime minister. I believe they went to Japan and Singapore and India, back through Europe into Canada. So it was like a long haul. And because of that, obviously it's taxing and you need to, you know, like regenerate yourself. So she was on like a rest recuperation break. Nothing was unusual when she got back home. She didn't come home and notice anything out of sorts, but about a week in, she also notices that somebody's gone through her personal items and things are missing, but she doesn't think it's like a stranger who broke into her house. She accused her boyfriend at the time of doing it. I'm not sure if she thought it was like some form of prank, but she was upset about it. He denied that he had anything to do with it, but that was like who she had focused it on. Unfortunately, we know it wasn't the boyfriend. And on the night of November 23rd, the Tweed piece of motherfucking shit creeper, he comes back to her house. He sneaks in at night through an open basement window. She, at the time, was awake and on the phone with her boyfriend, making plans for the following evening to have dinner. So while she's on the phone, this squad is hiding in her basement and her cat makes its way downstairs. And this cat sees him, so it just fixates on him and just stares. Okay, the more that's processing, like there's more like chill. I cannot even. Like you think this stuff just like happens in the movie, like, and in like the most unrealistic circumstances. To this day, I still like check shower curtains to make sure like nobody's in there, or closets. I go around my house like multiple times to make sure like everything is closed and locked, and it's because of shit like this. Like everybody in my family thinks I'm crazy. You guys, this is a true story too. I even, before I was married, used to shower with a knife in my shower because it was just like me and my daughter who lived in our apartment. So I was like, you know, this is one place that I could be caught off guard, but oh hell no, you're not going to catch me off guard, buddy. But every time like my girlfriends came over and got ready before we would go out, they'd be like, why the hell do you have a knife in your shower? I guarantee all of you guys are going to do the same if you're living alone right now. And Jen, who's in the bathtub right now, go and get a knife. You need to protect yourself, girl. So Marie-France gets off the phone with her boyfriend and she's ready to go to bed. And I mean, it sounds like she must always sleep with her cats or wanted to at least make sure that they were like in the house and safe. So she's looking around the house for her cat. And she makes her way down to the basement and she sees that the cat is like fixated on something in the corner. So as she's walking, she sees this guy, but she can't tell who he is. He's got like his face covered up. Hearing the story of how everything transpired, you can just feel like her bravery and just how like strong and badass she was. Like instead of losing her shit and cowering, she looks at him and screams like, you bastard, like what the are you doing in my house, basically? And he lunges at her. He's got a flashlight, like one of those like heavy metal flashlights, and he hits her over the head with it. He then ties her up to one of those like structural poles that's in the basement, and he blindfolds her and he puts duct tape around her mouth. And like all of the other attacks, starts taking pictures of her. This goes on for quite a while. He even takes his time going up throughout the house to make sure everything was locked and secured and that windows were closed and there was no chance of anybody, you know, reporting or seeing anything suspicious. And then he goes back down and he unties her. There was another struggle where Marie-France was fighting to save herself and she runs away, but he gains control of the situation. I don't want to go into too much detail, partly because it just makes my skin crawl and makes me want to throw up and just makes me so sick. There is a warning here. Without going into so much detail, I will briefly touch on what happened within the bedroom. Basically, anything that you can imagine being your worst nightmare is what happened. She was abused, assaulted, raped. And this isn't just, you know, seconds of me saying that out loud and explaining it and it being done. This is hours and hours. Through her duct tape, she's trying to beg for her life. And equally as disturbing and sickening is that all while this is happening, he's repeating his same patterns of taking photos, but he's also videotaping. She was so determined though. There was even a point where he left the bedroom to again go and look around the house to make sure like everything was closed and locked up, and she was able to hurl herself like off of the bed and try to make her way to her ensuite, but I guess she hit a wall and a picture knocked down and broke, so he heard this and ran back before she had a chance to get into the ensuite and lock her door. So from that point it just continued. She also was made to put on lingerie of hers and take photos, and then he tries to suffocate her with a pillow, and this woman is just such a phenomenal woman. She was strong enough, having already endured what she did, being blindfolded, duct taped around her mouth, having her hands bound, she was able to fight away from him. So he's like, okay, you know, like if you stop and you cooperate, I'll let you go. So she settles down a little bit, and then he rips off a piece of duct tape and he places it over her nose, which is the last option that she has left to breathe from because he's already got her mouth duct taped. All while the camera is still rolling for his fucked up fetish. It captures her dying. He still has the camera rolling. He puts her back in her bed, strips off all of the bedding, washes everything, makes sure he cleans up the area behind himself so that he's not leaving any DNA, grabs some of the lingerie and underwear, and he leaves. So since she wasn't expected back at work because she was on like rest leave, it wasn't until the next day that her boyfriend found her when she didn't show up to their scheduled dinner. And in those early days, they actually suspected the boyfriend because there was no entry point into her house. So they just assumed that whoever it was somebody that she knew. He also demands to take a polygraph test though. So he passes that, and attention kind of goes to a pilot in the military, and he goes through a series of intense interrogations, but again, they have nothing to hold him on, so everything's kind of at a standstill again. Naturally, detectives are super anxious to solve this. You've got somebody very respected in the military who's been killed. Oh, you guys, I need a snack break. Like, it's so good it hurts. It hurts my glands. Do you know what I mean? Just wash it down. There's a part of you that's hoping like, okay, whoever this person is, you know, now things are really intense. Detectives are on it, wanting to solve this. You'd wish that they just come to some sort of revelation of what a piece of shit they were and stop. Unfortunately, though, that's not the case. On January 28th, it takes the bravery of another beautiful, intelligent, amazing woman named Jessica Lloyd to catch this monster. Jessica was born in Ottawa. Her dad worked in the military as well. He was part of a Navy command, I believe. And then after he retired, the family moved out to Belleville, which I think is like 30 minutes from Tweed. It sounds like very similar, you know, like cozy little town that you would want to retire and live in or raise your family in. They built their like, you know, family dream home out there. And when her father had passed away, Jessica actually inherited it. So she was living in her childhood home. And Jessica was a great girl. She had a good job. She worked at a transit company as one of the transit planners. Like Marie-France, she was very loved by everybody. I think a lot of people in her area also knew her very well just based on her bubbly personality and her beautiful smile. Like, she was just somebody that you recognized and wanted to associate with. And I mean, you can just feel that radiate from looking at any photo of her. You can just get that vibe that she was one of those positive people who had a zest for life and naturally just kind of like had a magnet for people to attach to. So because of that, naturally she spent a lot of time with friends. And on January 28th, she had just gotten back home from visiting a friend. She texted them at 10:30 to let them know that she made it home safe. And then she went to bed and wakes up in the middle of the night to a man standing over her bed. This guy tells her to roll over and lay on her stomach. In Jessica's case, her approach to the situation was just to comply and surrender and just give in to any of the demands and try to not rock the boat or show resistance, and hopefully that would allow her to live. He ties her hands behind her back. He blindfolds her. There's no need for us to repeat the same situation that we already have. She endured the same trauma and torture and abuse that Marie-France did. This also was documented through video and photos. At one point, after hours and hours of this attack, the intruder gets Jessica dressed. He takes her to his vehicle and he drives her back to his house. When they get there, he forces her to have a shower. When she gets out of the shower, it sounds like in a bid to try to save her life, she says that she feels a seizure coming on, and on camera, she has what appears to be a seizure. When her family reviewed the tape, they said that she was never prone to seizures and never had one before. So it sounds like it was an attempt to try and pull on some form of emotional string on this animal. Like, I just can't even call him like a man or a guy, just a piece of trash. On the tape, it appears to somewhat, I guess, show some form of side where there was a slight glimpse of empathy where he was coaching her through it and trying to calm her down and make sure that she didn't like bite her tongue. But in the end, he never called for help, didn't take her to the hospital like she was asking to. And I think at this point, she just realized like that was the answer that she needed. This guy didn't have a heart. And at this point, she says, if I'm gonna die, please let my mom know that I love her. I think one of the parts that's even more gut-wrenching about Jessica's story is that at the very end of everything that she had endured, she was led to believe that she was going to be set free. Her clothes were put back on and she was being led to the front door. So in her mind, she must have been like, oh my God, you know, like we did this, we made it. And before getting to the door, she's hit over the head with this flashlight, leaving her unconscious. And then ultimately, she's strangled to death. The next day, Jessica's reported missing. As I mentioned, she was like a very valued employee, and part of that was because of how reliable she is. So when she didn't show up to work, her boss called her mother immediately and was like, you know, I think something's going on. Right away, all of her family and friends are taking this really seriously. They've got search parties going out. They've got flyers going up all around the town. And then when police get involved, it sounds like they start communicating with like the surrounding towns, because this didn't happen in Tweed where a lot of the other attacks were happening. Then now there's like all of this correlation that like what the heck is going on here. So on February 4th, detectives end up setting up a roadblock and they want to inspect the vehicles of the residents coming through, because while they were searching the area around Jessica's house, they were able to pull up some tire tracks from a farmer's field that was just behind Jessica's house. And from those tracks, they think that it's some way connected because there were footprints leading from her house into the field. So with everything that had been going on and not really a lot of clues, they're like, okay, like this has got to be something for us to go on. So when they look into the tire track pattern, they're able to decipher that it belongs to an SUV of sorts. They were able to narrow it down to something like a Pathfinder or a Jeep Cherokee or 4Runner. And so they get this roadblock set up, and one of the first vehicles that rolls up is a Pathfinder. So the driver pulls over. He's in a blue military uniform. They find out this is a guy named Russel Williams. He actually runs the base for the military in that area. Nothing seems to be too suspicious. He's not like deflecting anything. He seems to just be in a hurry to get back home, answering questions. And then the officer takes measurements of the distance between like the tire, you know, like the distance between like each tire under the vehicle. The distance between the tires. That makes sense. Okay. So he answers, you know, like their routine questions. They measure the tires. He's sent on his way. And allegedly, there's like a back and forth discussion between the investigators that are at this roadblock, because they're like, oh, you know, like, perfect, like on to the next one. he's a colonel at the military base, like one less person that we need to look into. But some of the detectives, they weren't cool with that. So ultimately it came to the decision where they were like, no, you know, just like everybody else whose vehicles are matching the same description as these imprints, we've got to put surveillance on him. So they do. On the surface, this guy is very impressive. He's one of the top ranking colonels in the military. He runs his own air base. And this was like the guy that was trusted to fly the Queen and Prince Philip when they were here doing their tours. He's also the guy that was trusted to fly around our Prime Minister, the one who instructed a lot of our military pilots. And then on like the community level, he is also the face of countless events that he would need to make appearances for. He grew up in a pretty typical upbringing, I guess. His parents were divorced, but he got along well with his stepdad. There was nothing overly unusual about like the blended home dynamic. He's explained as quite awkward though. He didn't have a bunch of friends, but the ones he had, he was close to. He's described as funny, a good friend to be around, a little shy, awkward. And the only thing that was just like out of the ordinary and just a little bit excessive was that he had quite an intense case of OCD. In college, he had a girlfriend finally that he seemed to be really devoted to. She caught him off guard because she ended up dumping him and it seemed like it wasn't something that he expected was going to happen. So he was really torn up about it and kind of retreated back a little bit. And it sounds like around this time, Top Gun came out and he became really fixated on it, overly obsessed, would watch it on repeat, probably like what I do with Titanic, but like over and over, and could recite it, and then started focusing on wanting to have a career as being a pilot in the Air Force. And then some of his friends teased like the only reason he wanted to do it was so that he could like try to win his girlfriend back. Regardless of whether that was his intention or not, he succeeded. He became, I'm sure in his own mind, his own version of Tom Cruise. He didn't win back the girl, but he did marry. Sometimes when I read these stories and they're in Canada and I hear like familiar places that I go to lots or that are close to me, I'm like, ooh. So he met her in Calgary, which is just like a 3-hour drive from where we live. And actually, when I was reading, he did spend quite a bit of time here in Edmonton when he was like picking up troops. I guess like we were one of like the bases to like take them and then fly them on to their next destination. So yeah, perfect. He met a woman in Calgary. She was very successful. And yeah, he just kind of flourished. He succeeded and excelled at like everything that he applied himself to. I'm sure part of that was like the OCD because he just became so fixated on a goal and then accomplished it. So he climbs the ranks quite fast, starting as a pilot and then as an instructor, and then eventually becoming his own base commander and a colonel. And it sounds like he was the type of colonel that I guess for me, I don't think I've ever met one, but just based off like movies or shows, you just kind of expect them to be like very stern and rigid. And he wasn't described that way. Everybody liked to work for him. They found themselves very lucky to be a part of his base. He wasn't like an overshare and like very out there and outgoing, but he was very kind and fair, just like a boss who respected and appreciated you. So learning more about him, detectives are obviously like, hey, like this guy Ubers the Queen around in a jet. There's no way that he's moonlighting as like a creep beyond creepazoid, escalated murderer. But naturally, like with anybody that you have, you know, that could potentially fit something or evidence is kind of lining up, you've got to eliminate them. So they bring him in for questioning. So he willingly goes down to be interviewed and he's everything people describe him as: very polite. He's super calm, respectful, and cooperative. He doesn't sit down like with any arrogance or puffed up chest or demanding a lawyer. Like it sounds like he's sitting down with a friend. You can find a lot of this interview on YouTube. I'll actually put the link to the one that I watched in the description. It's fascinating. The entire interview itself lasted over 10 hours, but this is like a 2.5-hour video. Probably seems like super long if you're not really into this kind of stuff, but if you are interested in like interrogations, I think this is actually known as one of the most like brilliant interrogations in Canadian history. The detective conducting this interview was so patient, so tactful and skilled. It's just like, it was phenomenal to watch. Hard, very hard. But if you're into interrogations, you gotta see it. So for a long time, he's just like building a rapport and being patient with Russel. As time's going on, you know, he just kind of keeps coming back to trying to get Russel to understand, you know, like that it's a little bit weird that there's like a connection here. He admits that he had met Marie-France and that they worked together for one flight. Now all of a sudden, Jessica Lloyd has disappeared and the tire tracks match the tire tracks on his Pathfinder. You can see in this interview as he's just like analyzing and silently realizing that like things are crumbling around him. And I think one of the key points of this interview taking a turn was the detective actually bluffed, and he said, you know, like that they've got search warrants going on and that they had already combed through Marie-France's house and Jessica's house. With Marie-France, he asked him, you know, would there be any reason for her to have specific writings about you in her diary? And it kind of caught him off guard because he's just said, you know, like they met one time. Why would she be writing about me in her journal? Shortly after that, he was taken down a notch and he's like, oh shit, you know, like what did she say? Was there things said? It's safe to assume that he didn't just meet her once. You know, he obviously had access to her files. That's how he knew where she worked. And there was also a statement from one of Russel's friends who mentioned that she was teaching him how to speak French better because it was required for him to get like an additional promotion at like the next rank or something like that. So there's assumptions that they knew each other more than just on this like one flight that he's alleging. So then after that, they've taken his shoes and they're doing like an imprint impression to try to match it with the shoes from Jessica's house leading to the tire tracks. And that comes back like within the hours of them doing their interrogation. And the detective's like, okay, well, like every time I leave this room to go check how progress is going, I keep coming back and like shit's just looking worse for you. So now we're at a point where, you know, like I want to give you respect. I want to give you control of the situation as much as you can. Do you want to take this opportunity to get something off your chest and tell us what's going on? Because we're going to figure it out. And then he tells them, we've got a search warrant for your house. Like cops are there right now. And he had two properties actually. There was a property that his wife primarily lived out of because that was closer to work for her. And since he was mostly at the base, he had the Tweed house that she didn't spend a lot of time at. In between like shifts and stuff, he would go back home to their home, but he primarily stayed at the Tweed and she stayed at the other house. So when he finds out that investigators are looking at both properties, all of a sudden he's got this form of empathy for his wife and he's worried that they're going to ransack and destroy her house. So he basically says, how can I try to diffuse the situation and not cause her as much harm in the long run? I don't want them to destroy the house is basically what he said. So the detective's like, well, yeah, I guess like that's all in your control. You know, you gotta give us what you're willing to give us at this point. Otherwise, we just are going to keep looking for it for ourselves. And he cracks. So the detective asks where Jessica is and he says, get me a map. From there, everything came to light. He confessed to all of the break-ins. He confessed to both of the killings, both of the attacks on the two women who lived close to his house. Ultimately, he actually had to lead detectives to Jessica's body because he had it hidden. Get this. Remember Larry, the gentleman at the beginning of the story who was originally suspected of the attack on that second woman? Yeah. Larry was his neighbor, and it sounds like he was trying to frame and pin stuff on Larry once he found out that this woman had already given his name, because not long after the killings, there was a break-in in Larry's shed and some items went missing. To this day, they've never been recovered. But what's also suspicious is that Jessica's body was found on, I believe it's like a farmland, and it belonged to Larry. So who knows if he was gonna like start planting things that were like from his shed to like further incriminate him. We don't know. We have no proof. These are just assumptions. But it sounds like Larry was about to take the heat for all of this. Like I said, Russel comes clean about everything. And then he also admits that they're going to find boxes with a lot of these undergarments. There was a lot that he had still kept, but it came to light that he actually ended up burning a shitload of items because the collection was becoming too much. There was over 1,000 pieces of lingerie that he had stole. So it was just becoming, too much for him to hide. So he actually burned a lot of it. He lets them know that they're going to find memory cards that he's tried to erase. He admits that on there's going to be photos of these break-ins, these attacks, and both of the killings. There was like a mountain of evidence. Not like they needed it because he admitted it, but it's really disturbing. When you just put it into perspective and realize that this is like real life, like he broke in and stole and did all this and carried out these acts, it's fucked up. They also found on his computer child pornography and photos of him in an underage girl's bedroom. But when it came time for him to admit all the crimes that he did, this struck a nerve with him. He was like, I will confess to the other things. I am not confessing to being a child creep. And he also didn't want to admit to stalking his victims. For some reason, in his mind, being a random attack was an easier pill to swallow. So those are two things that he's never admitted. He ultimately pled guilty to 88 charges. And in Canada, even though 2 of those charges were first-degree murder, they aren't served one after another. It's served together. So technically, there's a chance that after 25 years, he's eligible for parole. There's no charge of life without the possibility of parole. It's 25-year life sentence, then you can apply for parole. The chances of him being granted parole are virtually impossible. He's like in the same category as Paul Bernardo, but it's still a sentence. I guess like regardless of whether you think it's impossible, there's still that option, which is frustrating. And another frustrating thing is part of like his military work prior to everything, he's still eligible for his pension, which is like $66,000 a year, I think, which is such a crock of shit. Like that should be going to the survivors and the victims' families. Right now, he's serving his sentence in the same prison as Paul Bernardo. He's actually on the same unit too. And I mean, the only content, I guess, that I took from this sentence of his, even though it doesn't, bring justice to like his victims or anything, but I thought he was deserving of, is that allegedly him and Paul Bernardo are on a separate wing because they can't be in general population. They've got them like tucked away so that the other inmates can't walk by them and say and do things. And they've also got plexiglass like covering the like seal that they put their food through because inmates were walking by and throwing their shit at them. Not like food or like garbage, but actual human shit. So like that's great. May he forever spend his days covered in human feces. You guys will have to let me know in the comments how many times you've gotten up to check if your windows are locked or if you've locked your doors, if you checked your drawers, if you're having showers with knives now. If you weren't before, you probably are now. We gotta protect ourselves, guys. That is it for me today. That is the case of one of our biggest disgraces in Canadian history. Thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so much. I will see you on Saturday and I'll miss you until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.